so late. Well, I'm so late in posting these. This is going to be the last video for the week, and we're going to take the same kind of idea of eliminating the fractions and do our best to eliminate decimals. The reality is this I don't necessarily think helps too much. I would rather just type those decimals in my calculator. But I'm going to go ahead and show you how this lesson works. So this is the example that your textbook works through. I'm going to show you this process, and then I'm going to show you probably just one more, and then I'm going to let you do your homework. And guys, I don't really care how you get to the answer. If it's easier for you to do it like this, or if it's easier for you to just move your decimals. Like if I was working this, I would just pick my 2.4 up and move it over and solve for x. But your textbook is going to introduce an idea, and you will use this idea later in a slightly altered version. So I guess they're showing you this in order to prepare you for later on. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to find the largest place value. Decimal place value. So here's a decimal that's tenths. Here's a decimal that's hundredths. Hundredths is bigger than tenths, so I'm going to multiply everything by 100. I'm going to multiply everything by the largest place value. So I'm going to multiply that by 100, this by 100, and this by 100. 3x times 100 is 300x. 2.4 times 100 is, why did I put an equal sign there? Okay. 2.4 times 100 is 240. 2.94 times 100 is just 294. And now we just solve for x like we normally would. I'm going to move this 240 over and I'm going to subtract it. 294 minus 240 gives me 54. And then I'm going to move my 300 over, and I have 54 divided by 300. Now there is one difference here, and the difference is this. If my problem is given to me in decimal form, then my answer needs to be given in decimal form. You will rarely in algebra see decimals. You will almost always see them in fraction form. I know that lines of science that are mathematical based will use decimals, but in algebra it will almost always be fractions. But because this is a problem given with a decimal, or given in decimal form, we are going to put our answer in decimal form. And this gives me x equals, I think it's 0.18. Let me check. Yes, 0.18. So that's how this textbook has you do these. We're going to do one more, but the reality is I would just work it as a normal decimal, and then I can just sort of check off that I showed you this process. This process will be used later, like I said, and it will be a little bit different and actually be helpful. This is kind of not super helpful in my opinion. All right, so let's look at one more example, and then I'm going to give you guys your homework assignment and let you complete that. First thing we're going to do before we work on eliminating our decimals is we're going to distribute this out. Okay, I'm going to start inside my parentheses. I can't do anything inside, so I'm going to look outside. 5 times x is 5x. 5 times 1.3 is 6.5. Now bring everything down that I'm not using. And then again, for the process they're wanting us to become familiar with is I'm going to multiply everything by the largest place value. Well, here's one decimal, which is tens. Here's two decimals, which is hundreds. Two decimals, which is hundreds. So the biggest decimal place is the hundreds place. Let me erase my line. So I'm going to multiply everything again, in this case, by 100. It's not always going to be 100. It's going to be whatever the largest place value is. It just happens to be 100 this round. Okay? So now I'm going to just work this out. 100 times 5 is 500x. 100 times 6.5 is 650. 0.03 times 100 is 3. 2.05 times 100 is 205. Now I just solve it like I normally would. I'm going to move both of these things over. So what I'm going to have is 205 minus 650 minus 3. And I'm going to end up with 500x equals negative 403. Move this 500 over. And remember, because I started with decimals, my answers are going to be in decimal form, and it's negative 0.806. Now again, your homework, I don't really care which process that you use. In my opinion, working this, just typing decimals into my calculator is a little quicker than this. Now this would be helpful maybe, I don't know. I just think it's easier to do it as decimals, okay? But I have to show you this lesson. It's one of those things we have to do. So there's that. For homework, I am going to pull questions from activity 2 and 3 from lesson 19. My textbook has different page numbers than yours does, so I'm not positive which page that is, but it's lesson 19 in your textbook. Activity 1 is a class work assignment, which I've already worked at least one of those, if not both of those problems. And then there's an activity 2 on the first page and an activity 3 on the second page. I'm going to pull those 4 problems from activity 2, and then I'm going to pull the first 4 problems from activity 3 that are the same concept, and I'm going to put those as the questions. So you can go ahead and do the work from lesson 19 and then just be able to put your answers. And actually, I think this one is multiple choice. It may be true or false, but I think this activity or this lesson on the quiz maker is multiple choice. All right, so if you, like I said, I don't really care which process you use. If it's easier and quicker just to use it as decimals, that's totally fine with me. Let me know if you have any questions.